Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert Rand, your host. Today, I'm joined by Derric from the eCommerce Tech.io team, and we're going to be discussing how to choose e-commerce extensions and apps. Basically, whenever it's time for an add-on, a module, an app, an extension, a plugin, some sort of additional software that you're going to add on top of your e-commerce platform in order to add new features or functionality to make a better user experience or in order to improve the order fulfillment or admin experience or some other facet of your site, what that process could potentially look like or should potentially look like more likely. So with no further ado, Derric, would you do the honor of introducing yourself?
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me. Where to begin? I have been running eCommerce Tech.io for about a year now, and really just wanted to dive into the extensive app ecosystem, especially the Shopify app ecosystem. But we look at a lot of different tools and technologies and how it's going to affect e-commerce, whether it's a good fit for stores, what kind of stores different tools are a fit for, when people should be thinking about adding them. And then just really thinking about that customer experience and what is it going to look like in, like, let's say 10 years from now, and what tools are going to get us to, a higher level of performance so we can compete with the big dogs in the
market. Very cool. All right. So the man after my own heart, in essence, people on the podcast, listeners have heard me say it many a time that it takes a village to operate a successful and growing e-commerce site, that there's going to be lots of tech involved, and you've got to really pick winners, and you have to, there's a trade-off, I suppose. And that's probably a good topic for us to chat a little bit more about today, but there's weight added. There are, security and other considerations as you go. So certainly important to choose wisely. And, what are some of those different types of add-ons? Or maybe we'll take a step backwards. How do some of these add-ons differ? How do apps or extensions differentiate from each other, just at the highest level, for someone that's trying to shop? Maybe whether you're a small business just breaking into e-commerce as a startup, or maybe if you're an enterprise, you might, in many cases, be looking at different types of add-on software.
Yeah, you've got a few different ways that it could work. I'd say, some things are that one-off purchase that is going to just, maybe it's just a tweak to your theme code or some quick fix. I'd say most tools today are SaaS apps that are monthly recurring subscriptions. And the theory behind paying a monthly recurring subscription is that the company behind that is working towards bettering and improving the technology over time, or at the very minimum, at least staying up to date with changes in security functionality and stuff like that. Depending on what kind of app you're using, it could be pulling very sensitive data from your company. And so I think that's kind of another differentiator. Is this app intrusive or not intrusive to my business? A lot of apps that plug into like a Shopify into your Shopify store will immediately basically download all of your data. And they do this usually under the theory, and it's usually holds true, that they need that data to better their own app. But you can imagine that even though Shopify vets all of these tools very extensively, there will be some bad actors or just some opportunity for security threats and hacks on those companies who sometimes are very early stage startups and aren't that well funded. So you got to think about, like, what is the end purpose of this app? If it really is just a one-time fix, then it should be a one-time purchase. And I do see people doing things like maybe they need an app that helps them update meta fields or something. That should be a one-time fix, but yet the app is charging them monthly recurring. That's a broken business model, and you want to avoid tools like that. On the flip side, you could find tools that are very fast growing, and the feature set is changing extensively over time, and you should, in that case, usually be very willing to pay that monthly subscription fee that you're gonna find associated with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that in the Magento ecosystem, we're seeing more SaaS companies come about where instead of getting that one-time fix, you're getting more features and functionality bundled with more ongoing support and something that it's going to evolve with you a little bit more. But one of the things that I think in all these ecosystems you see with SaaS is that you're adding to your ongoing cost. So those bills just keep going up as you add one after another, apps to your site, where you're going to have that kind of ongoing billing.
Yeah, for the most part, the that should be calculated like from an ROI standpoint. So yeah, costs will go up, but return on that individual app should be relatively easily trackable. Most apps these days are going to affect pretty clear metric, whether it's decreasing customer service inquiries, increasing conversion rate on the website. Something that even increases page speed. Load time has that ancillary effect of increasing conversion rate. And so think about that metric of like, what is this impacting? And that's how you justify the ROI. But again, you run into, I think, what your specialty and knowledge is around, which is, okay, I'm paying $150 a month, or I could pay $1,500 and build it myself. And so, that's just 10 months, equivalent of paying for this. If I'm going to pay for it for the next 5 years, that's great. But then the question is, okay, well, at $150 a month versus $1,500, for the $1,500, what's my own maintenance cost going to be for this? Can I do it as well as them? And what you're saying is like apps today are changing. They're actually not one-off fixes so much as they're evolving and staying up to date with security measures, which means that monthly fee is actually going to them updating the security patches, to them improving the bells and whistles and feature set for you. And so it can be a really tough decision between building in-house versus paying for an app or a partner. But at the end of the day, there's a straight cost benefit analysis that can usually be drawn from it.
Sure. And you have, and you've touched on a little bit of it, other challenges that go into the mix, because, if you're going to rely on a lot of different apps, they may conflict, and you can have the same with extensions or plugins that you install on a site. But with apps, often you have a lot less capability or access to work through those conflicts, to solve it through coding, because they're typically it's a it's a packaged product.
Yeah,
it's not something that you can go change the source code on.
Yeah, and that's why kind of one of those metrics to judge an app on is how willing are they to take your feedback into account. So in some cases, you might be the beta or alpha customer, and they will basically build what you want for them. In other cases, you're a little guy and they've got big enterprise clients and they'll basically never listen to you. And then in other cases, you're maybe like one of a vote. There's a voting system, and you can see where the features you care about rank up. At the end of the day, the app provider should absolutely be taking the feedback of their customers. They can't always build everything that everyone wants. But I have worked closely with apps who have helped me get the features I needed for success. And then the ones that, of course, couldn't provide that for me, I'm very likely to churn or look for a competitor that can do that one thing that I need that they can't do.
You talked about security. I'm going to come back around to that, maybe in a roundabout way, by asking you, who's writing all this software from your perspective? Different ecosystems, maybe there's a little bit more of one type of a provider versus another, but what are you running into at this point?
You said who's writing the software?
Are you seeing, so I'll give you an example. I know in the WooCommerce ecosystem that the WooCommerce team themselves are writing some of the extensions. In the Magento ecosystem, you're mostly seeing, perhaps independent agencies occasionally write the extensions, and there's a lot of teams, mostly in places like Eastern Europe and Asia, that are writing extensive libraries of extensions for the platform. So they might publish, many dozens of plugins. I know that it's a mixed bag in every platform. Certainly, who's building a SaaS company around these platforms might be a little bit different, because that often involves a bigger investment into one product as opposed to writing a bunch of smaller, one-off feature sets. In the Shopify world, my historical experience is that it ranges, from the apps that you're typically running into. What is it looking like today? Is it small groups? The 1-2 mom and pop kind of a shop.
It is. I call it two guys in the garage, because I think that's where a lot of it starts. and I've seen it, two guys in college or straight out of college, they want to launch an app. They've chosen to do it on the Shopify app ecosystem. They've got an idea. And honestly, with 4 apps a day launching on Shopify app ecosystem, 3.5 out of 4 are like 2 guys in a garage kind of apps. And it could be the other kind of in a garage. There's a couple of other types, which is an e-commerce store that solved their own problem essentially and then turned it into an app. I see that a lot. And an agency that solved the problem for their clients with proprietary tech, and they decided they wanted to launch that tech so moving from an agency to a tech company is really, really popular. Of course, the e-commerce platforms themselves might launch new tools, but they also are very big at acquiring tools. So if you strike it big in the WooCommerce or Shopify app ecosystem, maybe Shopify themselves will acquire you, which we've seen in a couple of unique cases. But for the most part,
cases, they might just start competing head on. I mean, we're seeing this from a lot of the big companies that they've got investors, they've been acquired, they have stockholders, whatever the case may be. Shopify, I think every year rolls out some new category that they're going to, in one way or another, compete with their ecosystem on. I think it's becoming more common.
Shopify themselves basically rolled out a competitor to MailChimp recently, which is definitely tackling that lower end of the email marketing curve because it's a really basic drag and drop email builder, which is essentially what MailChimp was. It doesn't have the full-fledged functionality of one of their biggest partners, Klaviyo, which apparently Klaviyo did 1.8 billion in transactions during Black Friday and Cyber Monday in their gross merchandise, under their control. And so I don't think Shopify will compete directly with Klaviyo, but there was a scandal in the market with MailChimp deciding that they weren't going to abide by Shopify's terms of service, so they were pulled from the App Store, and all the MailChimp customers had to be told to go through a third-party tool. And this is one of those risks that occurs when you're using, a tool. There's a chance that tool and your e-commerce platform might get in a tussle, and then all of a sudden, those years you've put into that one tool are just down the drain.
Sure, and I suppose it's a big difference to some extent, at least, between an open source platform and a SaaS platform that Shopify has that ability to lock down. Lock out someone from their API or, to have those kinds of experiences where on an open source platform, you have your own sets of challenges, but typically you have more manifest destiny, as the owner of the website. And, coming back to security, when we're talking about data, I thought it was really interesting that you hit on with some of these apps, they're getting a lot of data back from Shopify as a platform or perhaps, other platforms. I don't think Shopify is alone in that.
Yeah.
And they're storing this data. So they've got your customer data, perhaps your order data, different facets thereof, I imagine. I haven't really seen, and I've looked into it in the past, a lot of standards about, yes, there are expectations when it comes to things like GDPR and certain data protection, but I haven't seen a lot of standards when it comes to where these apps get hosted, monitoring of the platforms themselves that are hosting them, the hosting infrastructure. Basically, it's almost like saying, "Yeah, come onto our network. You don't need any antivirus software. You don't need a machine that's powerful enough not to slow down these websites. We're just going to let anybody in."
Yeah, there might not even be internal security control measures. So just as an example, like 2 guys in a garage can create an app and they're in their backend login. It could be, their username is admin and their password is 1234, and that gives you access to all of their customers. Like there's nobody double checking something like that for pretty much any app on the market. There's no standard. There are security measures, I would say, in some forms of how the data is stored, and there's supposed to be this kind of right to be forgotten, which is mandatory in some cases. I know that it's something along the lines of 30 days after your customer uninstalls the app, you are required to delete all of their data. But I'm quite confident that no one checks whether that actually occurs or not. it's just kind of like a wink, like delete that data kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it's a self-reported.
Yeah, exactly.
And because you and I both know that a lot of that data winds up commingled into different marketing campaigns and different data sets and systems, and it becomes very hard to to hit the back button on all the history that's happened and
It's also quite
backups
valuable
that you might have. And
I'd rather just keep it if I'm not going to get anything more than a slap in the wrist, or if they just say, "Did you delete that data?" We're going to go check, and then they go, "Okay, I'll delete it." Like I can delete it at any time, but I'll hold on to it until somebody actually kind of forces my hand.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. That I suppose that's worst case scenario, but when you're dealing, when this is your livelihood, when this is your business, worst case scenario, so it is worth thinking about understanding where your data might be, how that could potentially impact your customers, your business, your livelihood.
So let me, and to break it down from an e-commerce merchant standpoint, if you're doing like not that much, you're doing $1 million, 5 million, even $10 million a year in revenue. What are like the risks are relatively small as a small company. You can kind of take that risk and just say like, I need to move fast. I need to grow my customer base. And this tool will help me do that. So the increased risk of security isn't that big. But then over time, as you become a larger company, or maybe you've taken on larger investments from private equity or something like that, I've seen how that changes security protocols for this. And all of a sudden it's a month-long vetting process where any vendor that you're thinking about adding to your tech stack, you are scrutinizing how they store your data. And you're saying, how are you going to delete my data? Where is your data being stored? What are your security protocols? And you have this lengthy enterprise style sales process in order to vet and partner with that vendor. The pro is that it's a lot more secure, but the con is obviously that you are literally spending your own internal resources, time and money in order to just make sure that it's safe, which again, and security is obviously very important, but security is also a little bit like legal security. It's like at the end of the day, there'll always be some risk, and we're just trying to mitigate a certain percentage of it without increasing our costs exponentially. And we the risk of ruin is essentially what I'm talking about. If your risk of complete and utter disaster for your company, gets too high, that it becomes just bad for business. Too likely that some hacker will come in and steal all your data, email all your customers, and then you'll lose. Something like that, or steal your Instagram account and start posting spam, like as another example. But like that risk of ruin is directly correlated with how much money you're making and how fast your opportunity and the stakeholders involved, like private equity or investment.
Yeah, and I often see happen in a growth phase. That's the time when you probably should be sitting down for a deeper risk analysis, and that's probably the least likely time that you're going to find the time to actually do that. To say, what is my footprint here, and how is that part of the conversation about what am I adding onto my site, and what am I giving access to my site? And you mentioned earlier, which I'm completely on board with, if this app or extension or other module, if this is going to bring value to me, if this is going to bring positive return on investment, I want to grow, then, this makes sense value-wise to add to the site. And I absolutely, I don't mind stacking up a variety of different technology in order to get there, and lots of categories. We should probably talk a little bit about that yet, but, that you can put together to really get more value out of the site itself, better user experience, better basically build a better mousetrap. But what about support for these? Or do you find that when you do have conflicts, when you do have issues, maybe, there are failover points where something's not playing nicely with an API, maybe there's too much data flow or a system is overwhelmed, any number of issues, that do you find that you get a lot of love out of these different companies? Is there a way to tell where you might have the best customer experience as a merchant purchasing or signing on for one of these apps? Or
it can be tough because even if the pricing page says that at the enterprise plan you'll get an account manager, it doesn't mean that account manager is going to be helpful. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get stuff done with them, and it doesn't mean that their software isn't clunky, right? Like, if the software can be a pain in the butt, just for some reason, Infusionsoft comes to mind. Back like 5 years ago, Infusionsoft was just a pain.
It was heavy. Yeah.
I was with their customer success reps like every single day, just trying to figure out a different thing, get a different API working. It would just break all the time, right? And there's going to be that type of technology where you really are partnered. You're working hand in hand, almost like they're an agency. You're a tech partner because they're going to help you set these things up. And so you, in your vetting process, you need to be clear about that. And it starts with your own needs analysis. Do I have the internal resources to execute on this on my own? Do I understand the technology that I'm implementing? So if we don't have a head of marketing and we're implementing a CRM and no one here's ever used a CRM before, then we're going to, probably have a hard time with it and could even ultimately fail. But if our head of marketing is a HubSpot guru and knows everything about how the API works themselves, or can work closely with the in-house tech, CTO, then you're in a good spot to not need handholding. This is just like one random example, right? So you think about like what your resources look like internally and how much are you going to rely on that tech partner. Other things, come down to the nature of the tool. Some tools, it's like, one line of code installed on your site. That's all you need. And that's all that it really requires. And then you go into their own backend to create campaigns or whatever it is. Other tools require constant tweaking of different data points, full integration into your inventory management solution in 3PL, deep integrations into your checkout process and checkout pages to make sure those to adjust those. And you can tell just by the nature of the invasiveness how important it will be to have somebody on call 24/7. Because if that checkout page stops working, like you lose money immediately. And so those are the kinds of levels of severity you might think of when trying to figure out how important support is to you.
I guess if your customers can't use this special tracking link for the order that they've already placed, that's a pain. And it's not necessarily a good customer experience, but at least you got their money already, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If they can't get through the checkout, you're really in trouble. That's priority one.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little bonus on that. The irony is that if the tracking link doesn't work and they email customer service and your customer service team does a great job handling that ticket, they'll actually be more likely to buy from you than if the tracking link just worked and they didn't have to email your customer service.
That you built a relationship that you otherwise wouldn't have had.
Yeah, I don't recommend purposefully doing that, but technically it's been proven that minor customer service issues that are resolved with 5 out of 5 star ratings lead to better purchases over no problems.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. It's logical, so I can't argue with
I don't think it's logical. Data. I think people are illogical, and that's why it makes sense.
Yeah, well, I don't know. To me, if I buy something from a site and it just arrives and I never deal with them and I don't really have any relationship with them, it was a commodity experience.
That's
when
true.
You bring the human element in. I could see where you feel like you've built trust, you built rapport. There's something more there.
That's so another note to. Instead of having a minor customer service issue, just contact your customers afterwards. And I've actually seen people call every one of their customers after the product arrived and ask them how the experience was. That is a way better way to do it than the minor customer service issue.
I like that. So, you're picking these companies, you're picking from a mix. Sometimes it's hard to tell because it's the internet. You don't always know whether you're getting technology from your 2 guys in a garage or 2 gals or whatever it may be, or if you're dealing with a more reputable company. These are all challenges. Do you run into a lot of these companies offering some kind of a money back guarantee? I know that it's popular. With the Magento extensions, that a lot of the extension developers they offer it because if the thing's a dud for you, if you've got major conflicts and you don't want to move forward, they'll put in essence that they'll credit you back. They'll do something for you. I know in the app world, what I've historically run into is more likely a free trial to see, does it work well with your site? Does it do what you were hoping it would do?
Yeah, and I think all of the on the SaaS side, deciding what to offer, the customer is it's a spectrum of problems. If you don't give a free trial, then it's harder to get new customers or a money back guarantee. If you do give it, you might get more customers than you really need, and then have a high drop off point there. But so you might even have some abuse and some cost associated with it, especially if you have heavy onboarding, right? So you spent all this time with customer success, getting them up and running, only for them to bail on you, and that ends up being like a cost of goods sold, essentially, from a SaaS standpoint. And so I think the right thing to do or to always have is you want to get people to value as fast as possible. So as a SaaS app, you should be willing to give them time to figure out what that core value looks like. And it is between, I would say, 7 and 30 days is usually what it takes. In a larger enterprise tool that's clunky to install, is going to take like a month in setup time. You have a money back guarantee, or you don't have anything. And you have
likely you have got nothing because you're paying for some kind of a lengthy setup or implementation. So you're paying for real labor that there's no backtracking on. You better have done your homework before you signed on. And then typically speaking, those companies they have internal resources that vet these things to a pretty good degree before they sign on.
Yeah. And that's the cost. And that cost is on, it really is on both sides. It looks like it's on the merchant side, let's say, but it's the SaaS tool that's actually losing customers by making it so clunky of a process to use their tool. And it's not a bad thing. I'm saying clunky, but it's not I don't mean it as a bad word. Some tools are supposed to be clunky and complicated to install and then ultra valuable on the back end. And other tools are supposed to be one-click installs that magically make you money. And then there's, everywhere in between. At the end of the day, I like to think that, most tools are giving us enough information to make a pretty good decision even before we trial. So the trial or the money back guarantee is becoming more of unnecessary, a little bit more of an illusion. And instead, we are able to spend enough time to get a strong understanding of the value proposition. That being said, human nature, which we've already touched on, people kind of buy things in knee-jerk reactions. And I think that's where we have a little bit of a gray area. So my recommendation to anybody listening is to take your time, even with the most simple of tool installs or decisions. Widen your options when you can. So if you're just looking at, should I implement this tool or nothing? You can say, okay, well, what are alternatives to this? Or is there even a bigger problem than this problem that I should solve first? And then, of course, think about like the resources in the company and how the execution is going to go behind the tool. Who's going to maintain this tool or report on it? How are our monthly reports going to change from it? Yada, yada, yada. So kind of go down that rabbit hole of really thinking through any implementation, and then your trial period or money back guarantee won't really mean too much.
And do ratings and reviews play a big role in choosing these? Sometimes it's hard because some of the best tech, it's new. There's not a lot of history on it yet. Obviously, if something has hundreds of users giving it 5 stars, you want to hope that there's a reason for that, at least if the platform that the review's on is reputable, if you feel like you can trust it. How have you looked at that? Is that a major part of how you decide what's worth even looking at in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, if you know anything about Amazon, there's a whole marketplace for fake reviews you can go buy fake reviews on your Amazon product. So if you're a merchant today, you're probably thinking, well, if I can buy fake reviews for my product, then probably this SaaS app can buy fake reviews for their product. So, and that's one of many reasons why I don't usually look at reviews and ratings all too much. I look at personal recommendations from people that I can know and trust. So a closer set of reviews and feedback. There are also ways that apps can increase their 5-star reviews and decrease their 1-star reviews. just by being good at essentially marketing. So as an example, actually this tool here, Privy, in their onboarding process, it's quite brilliant. It's like step 1, do this, step 2, do that, step 3, give us a review, right? And so if you don't give them a review, there's just this annoying notification in your dashboard every time you log in. So they actually are one of the most reviewed products in the Shopify app ecosystem. And while they're a very large company and one of the most prevalent, there are other apps that have equal number of customers and 1/10 the reviews and so forth. So you can, and I hats off to Privy. I think it's
I think I'm going to send Ben an email and tell him, way to go. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're going to have to start doing that at JetRails.
It's a brilliant, little growth hack that helps you get app reviews, but it also leads to the convolution of the value of a review or your overall star rating and so forth. On the flip side, some tools are super enterprise heavy, right? So they might only get 100 customers a year, 100 new customers a year, but they're doing hundreds of millions of revenue and they're very reputable, right? So for those 100 customers. And then the thing is, it might be really hard to get reviews from their customers just based on the nature of the tool. And then one customer gets pissed off about one random thing, or they stopped using the tool, so it stopped working for them, but really they stopped working on it. And then they give the 1-star review, and that skews, a large rating set. So it's really, you can't just look at those things at face value. I do think that looking at the total number of reviews helps give you an idea of the size of company, but you kind of need to, in your head, multiply that by the size of the monthly recurring fee. So if it's a $5 product and there's 10,000 reviews, okay, that's about the equivalent of if it's a $10,000 product and there's 5 reviews. I guess, I don't know.
Well, and there's something to be said for that in terms of their revenue and what they can support off of that. And hey, look, it's a lot easier to support 5 customers in most cases than 10,000 customers. So there's a give and a take to what you're getting. I know that from the JetRails perspective, we work with with I'd say a more targeted list of customers, because we're dealing with primarily mid-market and enterprise users. And whether that's someone on an e-commerce platform like a Magento or WooCommerce or Xcart PrestaShop, whatever it may be, or whether that's the user that is going to be the author of an app that needs that mission critical web hosting behind it. We're dealing with a more limited number, and these are folks that get asked for reviews a lot, and so in many cases we may want to think about the Privy model, but we're trying not to overtax either. That we do go and ask folks once in a while, but then again, it's a never-ending challenge.
You're in the most challenging position of all, because as infrastructure, if you work well, that's good. If you don't work, I hate you. So there's no over the top moment where I really feel like giving you a 5-star review, but there are so many over the top moments where I definitely want to give you a 1-star review. So I would expect it.
I would say that, the hosting industry, it's to a lot of the hosting industry, I equate to dealing with your cable company, and there's not a ton of love there. Or your internet provider, your internet goes down. That's basically what we're talking about. You're losing infrastructure. A lot of people send a lot of Christmas gifts to the local meter reader from their electric company, right? But but this is something you need. JetRails, because we're more of that high touch, premium white glove service provider, we do get a lot of those 5-star reviews. It's what we're there for. That if we're not doing that, then we're not fulfilling our mission. That we've got dedicated account managers, and we get to know our customers better, and we're providing that managed and maintained and monitored solution.
Yeah. So don't
different. No. Probably not going to quite align with it, but on average, that's what we find. And it's funny but that impacts the overall ecosystem, because that's what users expect out of web hosting. They assume that it's kind of like cable companies, that they're all going to give you a pretty similar experience. You're stuck with whoever ran cables down your block, and and you're one of many, and you're not going to see a lot of love. For us, we spend time helping our clients speed up their sites and improve their scalability so that they stay up nicely during their heaviest traffic. And it's different than the set it and forget it model, or the self sign up and you're just gonna be in the background for waiting for a support ticket. Maybe for us, it's a much more proactive. So we do get those happy moments that we get to look at. But going back to the app ecosystem and the extension ecosystem a little bit more, you can purchase a lot of these things directly from one of these app stores, or in some cases you might go through a third party and perhaps sign up and then get some kind of an integration between them. Do you find that there's value in typically going to the app store or app marketplace that's hosted by the platform itself?
I like to go straight to the vendor when possible. A lot of the app ecosystems are trying to take a cut when you go through their marketplace. It's almost their referral commission because you found them on their marketplace, not on the internet itself or something like that. And it's kind of like, who do I want to support more? The massive platform or the typically smaller, little guy tech company, the smaller tech company. And I'd prefer to give it to them directly if there is such a fee. But even if there's not, it's you want to see if they're on the app marketplace. I think being listed is important. It does provide.
You hope that's meant that they've gone under some vetting in the Magento marketplace. You're going to have code review and marketing review to make sure that what you're saying and what you're doing jives with their standards. I know for other platforms, they've been improving as well, just like Magento has in the last few years. That it used to be the Wild West for most of these platforms. Anybody could list just about anything, and it's definitely gotten a little bit better. But I'm with you on, there is a moral. I don't know if it's a moral challenge, but there's a challenge nonetheless. Maybe a capitalist challenge about who gets the money, because if you're giving 20 or 30% to the app marketplace or the app store, extension store, whatever it may be, that's revenue that that's pretty much the profit in a lot of businesses. So because they're often high margins to be listed in those, it's tough to say what the best model is, because then you get the flip side of it, that these companies are trying to turn a profit, and you don't want to be one of these unicorns like Uber that doesn't know how to get into the black on their books. It's not really solvent.
They'll get there, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's part of the challenge. So when you get something that's open source, like a WooCommerce or a Magento, that for most of their users, they're giving away the code for free. I say that with a grain of salt, because when something is open source and they're getting code from the community and they're getting basically free marketing from the community, being their cheerleaders and recommending their stuff to the world, there's a give and a take, there's an ebb and a flow, but they've got to turn a profit somewhere. So if it's not there, then where, right? I think for a platform like Shopify that's charging the user already for the platform and charging them for credit card processing, and that they're stacking the deck a little bit, that they're making money in pretty much every angle from everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for merchants to figure out how these tools eat at their margins. And I mean, we're going back a little bit, but to think about how much of your entire revenue should be spent on tech spend. The smaller you are, the higher actually the percentage should be. So if I was saying it, I'd say we started about 5% of revenue is tech spend, and as we go maybe into the 5-10 million, it goes down 4 or 3, and then somewhere around 1% of overall revenue should be considered spent on, I would say, technology tools and vendors. Now it could be that it's spent on in-house technology, and it's higher than that. It depends on the exact business. Some businesses are just a little more tech centric, and they have a CTO and a DevOps and 4 other people. Others, there's no tech team at all. In those cases, that's kind of the trend of what I'm thinking for tech apps. There's supposed to be a smaller percentage of overall revenue as time goes down. Yeah. And then when we think about the marketplaces and how to choose where to purchase it, I my personal preference is to look at the marketplace as a place of validation, but then go to the company's website and install or book a demo or something like that from there.
And, I, based on my history in the industry, I always do love to pull things back to brick and mortar. And, when you're operating a store, multiple stores, you want to add something new in there. You want to do something. When you think about your overhead of a physical store, in rent, in human beings, you've got store clerks and maintenance people, and folks that are keeping it clean and orderly and stocked and marketed, in terms of displays and other things, and the list goes on, right? And you've got physical infrastructure that, let's hope that you've got restrooms for at least your employees, if not, your shoppers and other things. There's a very high percentage that can go into overhead in brick and mortar. And so I think in e-commerce, there's a big benefit that you can have a much lower percentage going into overall overhead. And I think that sometimes for some business owners that don't think of it that way, that they come at it like, 1 or 2% of my overall revenue, that feels like a hardship, when really in the history of selling things, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah. And of course, like, it's different for every business based on kind of the margin, the cost of goods sold. Drop shippers with slimmer margins, they're trying to cut back on all these tools. But usually the tools are ROI positive. So they increase revenue, which actually means that percentage wise, you would expect, it's an investment, of course. So maybe in month 1 and month 2 and month 3, a lot of tools haven't really caught up to performing at the speed that they need to be to pay for themselves. But typically a good tool will ramp up, be successful for a few year period of time, and prove its value, which lowers its cost on marginal impact of the business, but raises your overall spend, right? So tech spend should pretty much always go up over time.
Yeah. And, and when I say in terms of their percentage, I'll put a caveat in there that I know that there are a number of companies that offer billing models where you pay a percentage of your e-commerce revenue or something along those lines. I think that for most, that's tougher to swallow. Obviously, if you're in a vertical like electronics with thin margins, that at some point everybody ate away the pie, and that doesn't work. That I certainly prefer clear billing, where it's a predictable model. You know exactly what to expect, whether that's based upon a usage model and you have predictable usage, or whether that's a flat rate or what have you. I like knowing in advance what it's going to cost. And I'd say that I think one of the other challenges is the increase in cost, because once you're a subscriber and you're using something like an email marketing platform, you really don't want to change. I know BigCommerce, Shopify, all these companies, that are SaaS that have some interesting tools, and then you add on all the apps on top. You get to a point where if everybody increases their rates, every year or what have you, that there's an additive effect. So similar to everyone going after a percentage of your revenue, everybody taking a rate that's going to go up is dangerous. I haven't seen a lot of those rate increases overall, but I feel like we're getting to that point where we are going to see more of it, because once you're ingrained enough with a platform, they know they've got you. It is at that point back to cable companies and internet providers and what have you. When that bill goes up $10 a month, are you really going to do anything about it?
Pricing as well from the beginning, and so then they go, you know what, our tool is really valuable. I think we can charge people more, right? Or maybe it's the opposite. It's like, we have to make 10,000 server calls a minute, and we're not making money on these customers, so we can't support them at this tier level. And then of course you have inflation and a few other things. But most of the time,
you have now, now I've got as a tech company, I have to take care of GDPR, and now California just put out new standards, and and so I think it's also fair to say that these companies have their own, their own needs, their own requirements, their own challenges, and I see it in the Magento ecosystem. Most often, you'll pay one price for an extension if you're using it for the community edition or the open source version of Magento, and you'll pay a different price for the enterprise version for Magento Commerce.
It's the exact same thing, right? The tool is the same, but the price is different.
Yeah, or in Shopify, I imagine that there are probably still some apps that do that. If you're on Shopify Plus, you're going to pay more. But they've got in the Magento ecosystem, they're going to test that extension to work with Magento Enterprise, and they're going to sell it to a much more select small number of users. So they have to recoup some of that somewhere, aside from the fact that they know that you've got certain revenue if you're on that version of the platform. So, I always have that debate. Maybe there's a tiny bit of gouging in there, but there's also some reality. There's some hard costs that that these companies do have to take on to work with you, and perhaps an enterprise business that they've got to work on different scalability of their product to service your needs. You might need more support and have higher support expectations of them, that you can't wait a week for an answer. That maybe, that's just built into the pricing model. And again, whether you're Magento Enterprise or Shopify Plus, or not to make these things all the same, they're not, but maybe that's a part of the model. And that's something that it's not the end of the world to pay to meet your own needs as a business, that you have certain revenue. Now you need things to be more toward how JetRails looks at things, mission critical. And that doesn't always mean it's more expensive, but in some cases, it means that dirt cheap item might not be what makes the most sense for your business.
Yeah. And I think this actually, when you're choosing tools, I think there's a few things you need to be wary of, and now aware of. There's a really amazing shift that I'm looking forward to, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years in full price transparency and price fairness in SaaS. And so transparency is, of course, showing exactly the best price that anybody could get at any time, all the way through to enterprise. So not just saying contact sales, and the sales guy's like, I think they'll pay $30,000, even though I'm going to charge this other person $20,000, which I know is happening to some enterprise companies here in Silicon Valley. It's a pretty common practice to try and just get the most out of people, but it ends up leaving them with poor customer experience, high churn, and all sorts of other problems associated.
Yeah, we've even seen it, which I never thought I'd see in web hosting, where there are companies that they'll put you in a hosting environment without asking you about any of your traffic patterns. They'll put you on a long-term contract, sell you up the river for something that doesn't fit your needs. It's one thing if it's self-serve and the user takes the wrong thing, needs to upgrade, it's month to month, it's whatever it is. It's another when you might not even be a fit for their needs.
Long contracts are very risky with all tech partners. You need severe amounts of vetting. I hate contracts. In most cases, avoid at all costs. Ask, hey, do we need a contract? They're going to give you some BS and well, we're going to spend all this time onboarding you. We need to recoup the cost of this. And just say, well, I'll do it as long as we don't have to sign a contract, and then see if they say yes. Because whatever you could do to avoid the contract, I'm very serious about this, but I'm only going to quit if it doesn't work for my business, and if it doesn't work for my business, I don't want to pay for an additional 3 months, of the product.
I think it's absolutely fair to ask a company why that's required. And so, having come out of an agency background for years, there were products, there were services that we would offer month to month. If you wanted us to run your Google AdWords, campaign your Google ads that way, no problem, because most of that money is going to Google. We're not going to force you to give money to Google that you don't want to be giving to them if you've got reason not to be. Something's not matching up with your business at the moment.
Sell out a product,
but on the flip side, I wouldn't sell you a search engine optimization campaign that way, because I couldn't get you results in a month. And if I set your expectation that way, that this was some sort of a month to month with no commitment period, then I haven't managed your expectations and what the deliverables are.
Yeah, and I've gone back and forth on those, because there are long-term deliverable types of businesses. But at the end of the day, um, I I believe, even though I said earlier that I don't really, but I believe in humans to be relatively logical. And if I say on day one, this is going to take 6 months to work, and I say in my weekly report, this is still going to take 5 months and 3 weeks to work. If I say it enough times, they might actually believe it. Truth
Yeah.
be told, they don't. I can tell you, I also ran an agency for 4 years, and they actually want the results right away, even after they tell you that they're willing to wait. They get antsy. They feel like you're not pulling your weight. And then, of course, you part ways, and 3 months later, they're killing it. And they're like, I don't even know why. And it's like, well, it's all that work we did that we promised would start working in a little while. But
I definitely, it wasn't my average experience, but I definitely dealt with customers with issues like that, where it would be something we would tell them, hey, look, you're getting, this off of this marketing campaign that we're running. And we had solid metrics. It was all tracked. We could tell exactly, pinpoint how many leads and what results or how many sales made, depending on what type of business we were working for. And they'd say, oh, but our revenue's down, so we're going to stop this campaign. We'd say, yeah, but if we weren't running this campaign, your revenue would be down how much more? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That, why would you if this campaign is profitable and turning good metrics for you, then why wouldn't you just keep running this forever? I'm sorry that you have other channels that are performing really poorly. But sometimes, that decisions aren't always made on pure logic.
we get punished for other people's mistakes. That's why I guess we're both not in the agency life anymore.
Yeah, maybe. That's a bigger conversation, but yeah, it's.
I want to get back quickly to pricing fairness, because it's a really cool thing that's happening. And I think maybe not today, but in the near future, it'll be a decision point for a lot of merchants deciding which tool to go with. So some tools basically will charge you, essentially whatever the preset rate is. So imagine like Klaviyo as an example, again, in email marketing. If you go above this many users, you'll automatically get upgraded to the next tier of price. And there might be some warnings or other things that are set off there. Maybe you have to agree to it and they shut down. That happens. But at the end of the day, you move up in a tier. Maybe you weren't prepared for it, didn't notice it. And maybe you haven't even sent an email to your customers in like 3 months, but you're getting billed monthly for this tool. So this actually happened to me recently with an SMS marketing tool. For some reason, the campaigns were turned off by accident. And so for 3 months, paying the monthly fee, zero use of the tool. And in a true pricing fairness, what we have technologically now, apps can create an automatic downgrade or shut off of your service when they notice that you're not using it. This is very counterintuitive because the app doesn't make any money that month, which obviously they want to make more money. But at the end of the day, if they believe that they should make money on value and not on how many days have passed, then they should be, cranking down essentially how much they charge you when no value is being provided, and cranking it up when value is being provided. And so I believe in the future we will have pricing fairness types of tools that'll say up front, and you don't even have to worry about if you don't use us, you don't pay for us, we automatically downgrade you, we'll automatically shut you off, and you just pay for as much as you use.
Overall, I like that a lot. I like that future. That's a future that makes me happy. The only caveat is if it brings any risk to those companies that a lot of users switch on at the same time around certain seasons or holidays or things, and how they predict that to have enough, whether it's the computing resource or whether it's whether it's customer service or whatever they need in order to deliver to to these formerly dormant users that have sprung up. But those users could just as well cancel and come back on. So, overall, I like the idea. I mean,
I like what you're saying. I always assume infinite scalability, but of course,
yeah. Well, and it depends. Big or small. That we see a lot of users. We've got in public clouds like AWS, where we can auto scale them up as needed, and we don't have a lot of issue with it. We have other users that, they're not at that point. They're going to be better suited in bare metal. And so, we'll spin up what they need when they need it. And for predictable spikes, we'll spin up booster servers. Everything that we do is month to month. So we're very much behind that. We're not going to ask you for that long-term contract because we want to re-earn your business every month. We want that to be the relationship that you have. We don't want people feeling like they're shackled into a relationship they don't want to be in. But it really depends on the infrastructure of the company. And I think maybe more so on the support side, if there's any heavier element there. If it's really just, the technology side, the infrastructure side, I think for these companies, especially those that are more established, they can be really auto scaling for the most part, with certain exceptions, things that they just didn't imagine to load test for yet. Or
even Shopify crashes. So.
Well, yeah, even Shopify crashes, absolutely. And I think the other side to it is, for some of these apps, it's not always their system that's the limiter. So how many API calls is their app, hitting Shopify with it once? Yeah, and has that really been
tools like Facebook Messenger break all the time from an API standpoint? The users aren't noticing it, but business to business, you lose these API calls. And if you're using a customer service platform to manage responses, all of a sudden your customer service team is like, oh, I don't have any inquiries today, but they're actually just stuck in transit or literally won't get pushed because of a break in the system. So it happens all the time.
So let's pull away from the tech a little bit and talk more about, as a shop owner, you're going to go to an app store marketplace. You're going to be taking a look at these things. You're going to be checking Google, doing whatever you do to find these, asking around, perhaps in some cases, going to trade shows, learning about different things, conferences, whatever it may be. How do you effectively compare and contrast some of these features and functionalities? I mean, do you go to guides or demos or screenshots or, in some categories, like let's say shipping, it's tough. In some cases, a lot of the companies are owned by the same parent companies. So, whether you're talking like, ShipStation or Easy Ship or, Shipping Easy, not Easy Ship. A lot of these that use ship in the name. Yeah. Stamps.com, owns a bunch of these.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there that, how does a merchant really figure this out?
That's kind of why I exist, is because it's so complicated that I've made it my full-time job to do tech demos and understand the ecosystem. And I'm honestly, I'm only like 10% there. I still have another 90% of apps to review over the next 3 years. And of course, as I do that, there'll be another 90% pushed on top of it. So it's a never ending process. There's definitely ways that you want to think about when you're comparing tools. First one is, are they actually different? So with so many choices out there, you could stand essentially at the grocery store and you're looking at two different types of ketchup and they're the same. Like it doesn't actually matter, right? So why are we spending so much time choosing between them? And that can happen in some like 3PL and shipping solutions. A lot of those things have been commoditized and will be almost exactly the same. And so you might be comparing two very similar solutions. So be aware of when that's likely to occur, and it'll be in larger categories that have kind of been around for a while. And shipping and 3PLs have been around since before the internet, actually. So a few other ways maybe to think about comparison is, just getting into the tool. So getting a full demo of it or trial, as we talked about. But even before you do that, actually, you need to really list all the things that you're actually going to need. So list your own features. What do you need this to do actually? Like, is it going to require sending data back to my data warehouse so that it's not siloed? Or maybe it just needs to integrate with my e-commerce platform or integrate with a certain CRM that I need to use. So we're looking at those like must-have features, of course, and then going into what would be nice to have, which is like, oh, I'd like it to record UTM parameters to custom fields, and so that I can map those back to my CRM. I've seen that one a lot. People don't do that very well. or maybe you just wanted to do thousands of custom calls a day so that it's updating every 5 seconds instead of every 5 minutes, and things along those lines. But so those are some of the ways that I look to compare the tools. Price is like the last thing that I tend to look at, because I think price is value is the differentiator. Price is the cost. But we talked about it earlier, when the price is marginally impacting the business, so it's 1% of sales or something like that. That versus a tool that is not directly impacting the margin, like it's per page load, which is definitely different than per transaction amount, even though they can correlate. And then page loads kind of scale out, and you can see it like really, get down in cost per page load or something like that. Then that's like a good green flag to move from the percentage of sales to a different value metric. So that's another one that I look at. There's more, but talk to the sales. Oh, when you're talking to the sales rep, listen for cues from them to understand who their best customers actually are. I remember back to Infusionsoft, ironically, a few years ago. We bought it when we basically didn't have an email list yet. And they're like, we usually have customers that have, 10,000, 20,000 emails on their email list. And I was like, oh yeah, we have 0, or we had like 400 or something like that. And so that was a sign that maybe we were too early to purchase, which we were in that case. So you're looking for like signs of like, well, we usually work with people who have been a little bit more established than, they have 3 years of business under them. Not a early stage startup with 1 year of business or something like that. That's a sign that they actually work with enterprise companies, not mid-market solutions or.
Yeah, it's always been the case. If they can't list their pricing on their site, and you're a startup, they're probably not targeting you.
Yeah.
With rare exception that once in a while there is just something that's core to your business that you really need. I know, for instance, there are apps out there that do things like a product design tool. And if your company is going to be all about customizing some product, think about like designing your own t-shirt, and you've created something new and cool that you're going to do with that. Well, yeah, you might need to spend a little bit more per month in that, negotiate that rate with someone for this really, strong tool set because it's central to your business. But then you've got other tools within the site that, you can't afford to pay boku bucks for something that you're not going to get value out of yet. You're not up there. So yeah, email marketing, you've got Bronto, List Track, you've got, eCommerce, I've seen some great stuff from, all these upmarket, you can go up to Marketo, which was acquired by Adobe. You've got, Dot Mailer now, Dot Digital. There's all these, I'd consider more upmarket, where you're probably looking for a MailChimp, or I know, Klaviyo has had such great growth. Someone that might be able to help you at more of that earlier stage.
So that reminds me of another thing that you want to look for when talking to a sales rep or looking on the site. Are there features listed that you're going to pay for and not use? If so, there might be a cheaper solution for you someplace else, right? So if it's like A/B testing, and you've got your own account manager, and we're going to handhold you through the onboarding process, and you don't need all that stuff, but that's the only thing they offer, then you might want to look for a competitor. And then on the flip side, on the integrations front, like we said, we need to know what it's going to integrate with. I've heard this so many times. I go, do you integrate with X? And they go, well, we don't, but we have a custom API that anyone can use to integrate with anything. I'm like, oh, great. So I'll just spend, $1,500 of my own and then manage the API. And like, what am I paying you for? Like at this point, I look for.
Well, $1,500 might be a really good deal, and for a lot of those. So yeah. No, that stuff gets messy. You're hoping that their API is as good as they think it is.
Yeah, and that it has the actual things that you need it to do. Like sometimes you can't even you can only post, you can't even get, and that's like the whole API. You're like, what? Like, then we can't pull any data out of this. Then what's the point?
And from another side, you absolutely want something that is going to match your growth anticipation for the business, that you don't want to outgrow it, especially things that, when you're dealing with things like reward points, gift cards, things where the data is sticky. It's a pain to migrate to another platform for that, there isn't always an easy switch over between them, that they're not always, one-to-one with their data. So it can be a big job to migrate. So often you do want to hope that you're choosing things that you can work with for a long time. Once your team is really using something to manage your shipping, do you really want to rip that out? Probably not. You can, and people do all the time, but in essence, it's no longer just an add-on. It's something that you have data ingrained with. Maybe your live chat system perhaps might be easier to upgrade over time. You might not be keeping quite as much data in there. So,
yeah, exactly. And it changes your business processes. Pretty much any tool that you're going to add, it's going to change some process in the business. And you mentioned live chat, which is going to affect the entire customer service team. Loyalty programs are going to affect how marketers are working, or if there's customer success, it's going to affect and impact them. Email marketing is obviously affecting the whole marketing team, and sometimes parts of operations and parts of customer service. And the list goes on. Shipping is affecting your entire operations department. And so you want to think about, what are those changes going to be? The lock-in or switching costs are going to be down the road. And then how long will this tool work for me? Because even though we like to think we'll use it forever, and some tools we're going to use for a long period of time, I just try and aim for, will this work for the next 3 years of my business? And then even 1 year after using it, you should reevaluate your options. People do get, I would say, too stuck to a tool that they've just decided to put up with some of the lack of features or functionality that they have been promised but never delivered, or whatever it is. They get caught in their ways. And even if there is a switching cost, you have to reassess the value of actually switching.
Yeah, there's a lot of complacency out there, and I appreciate the loyalty. That's a good thing, right? That people want to stick with something and stick it out, and they don't want to just be tossing stuff around all the time. That this is core to their business. But yeah, I do think it's good to have that. And for me, part of that is a security and performance audit component, because there is such a thing as too many apps or add-ons. There is a way, we were talking about earlier, that you can have conflicts between these. They can absolutely impact your loading speed. They can, impact your security footprint. They can impact the chances of, your site going down at peak times, because now you're relying on all these other systems to be able to keep up with your traffic and all the other traffic that they're dealing with at peak times. There's also dev complexity, that now your developers need to work around all of these different moving pieces that, so if there's something that you're not using, if there's something that you're not getting value out of, I guess it's, we're at that time in history where if it's not bringing you joy,
yeah, joy is different than value, right?
Yeah, yeah. But in this case, I think our metric is value. If it's not really bringing you value, if it's just another thing, if you can't say that you have a reason to believe that it's impacting your revenue stream, your conversion rate, your customer success, customer loyalty, some metric that you care about, lifetime value. Sometimes it's just time to vote them off the island and say goodbye. Not for the $10 a month or $100 or $1,000 necessarily. Sometimes because there's a cost, and that's adding, whether it's milliseconds or seconds to your site, or again, security footprint or whatever else.
Complexity comes increased risk of failure.
Yeah, and increased just overall dev cost. That every time you want to make a change, there's all this extra code to work around. And so, in your opinion, have you hit a metric? How many apps on average or add-ons is too many? I see the average number in these ecosystems seem to continue to go up every year.
Yeah, I think the average number of tools that you should be using is continuing to rise. There is now, of course, the average number of apps just available is continuing to rise like exponentially. There's the Martech Today blog talks a lot about how many apps there are, like 15,000 and 40,000. It's just insane numbers. But overall, there will be at some point some consolidation in the industry, and that could lead to being able to use fewer apps that are good at lots of things. It's really tough though to balance those two competing forces, which is niche and great versus broad, slow, and good, right? Like, and that's what's always going on here, and that's why the number of tools overall is increasing. Because somebody said, "Oh, I'm just going to focus on social proof on websites," and somebody else was like, "I'm just going to focus on the product detail page optimization." Someone else was like, "I'm just going to focus on abandoned carts on SMS." And all of these little tiny tools are all valuable. There's nobody that's like, "I do all of that extremely well." No one does that right now. But I do believe consolidation is coming to the market.
I think that the market's ripe for it. I'm with you there. And I do see some of these companies being acquired. And so, it often takes time for those acquisitions to turn into any sort of, this throw around more buzzwords, right? Synergy or true merger of products and customer bases and things. You don't want to take a profitable company or a company that is working toward profitability and railroad some major changes that they can throw all that into disarray. But there's one that we didn't touch on earlier in terms of metrics for making choices. You get these companies that are in different parts of the globe, and most of the customers that I've worked with through the years are based in North America. Certainly, Jet Rails and other companies I've been involved with have customers around the globe, but majority in North America. That's got to have some impact as well, in multiple ways. So I guess it comes back to, you need what's going to make the most sense for your business. In terms of locality, that might impact things, when you're dealing with currencies or shipping providers or lots of other things. Do you see some other sort of, maybe they're fringe, maybe they're not, but decision factors that come up like that?
I would. I have two competing thoughts in my brain right now, but at the end of the day, I don't think regionality of the tech tool matters too much as compared to just overall performance. It could be of a minor concern, but
yeah, and I suppose if you're with a platform that's forcing conformity to GDPR and other standards, that certainly helps.
Well, actually, that could be a cost, because in the United States, you didn't have to be GDPR compliant, and now you do. And all of this, and that is essentially just a natural lowering of your email list building, which we all know drives a massive amounts of revenue. So it could have been a cost, but it's, I think in that case like that, you have to make maybe a business ethics case for it as well, and a few other things like, do you want to be on the future trend, or do you want to be a laggard? Do you want to risk compliance breaks because you're not compliant in the US, but you accidentally got an email from somebody that's a European citizen? Yada yada yada. So that's one thing that matters. Now, when you were talking about metrics, and regionality affects what metrics somebody might care about when they're developing an app, because of the way people talk. I know in Silicon Valley we've got all the buzzwords, right? And some people judge or create a metric that goes into your dashboard, and sometimes you don't understand exactly how that metric is calculated. So it could be two different email service providers can show you open rate, for example, and one's going to show you the total open rate as a percentage, and the other is going to show you the unique open rate. And you look at these, you send an email blast using each of them, and you go, well, this one outperformed that one. It's like, well, actually, they're showing you a different metric, and you just didn't realize that, this company chose like unique and this one chose total. And I don't even know in that case which one's right or wrong. And I don't like there's nothing right or wrong. The problem is understanding how the metric is calculated, really, and making sure that you know that. And so, especially when it comes to revenue reporting and tracking, everybody's taking credit for as much revenue as they can get, almost everybody at least. And you really want to understand, well, I made, I made $40,000 last month in abandoned cart recovery emails. It's like, okay, well, they were sent an email and they bought from you, but they never opened it, but you got credit for it. Like, so like that's a possibility. So you're just
absolutely,
getting
credit
for
or I added Apple Pay and 1,000 shoppers used it this quarter or something. Yeah, but are those net new shoppers or would they have just checked out with something else?
That's a great example as well. So you're like really excited that they're checking out with Apple Pay, but you don't know if maybe it confused users and you actually net revenue down, or maybe the amount that it increased users is slightly less than the cost of using Apple Pay. Maybe there's a 1% additional cost, using that payment processor. I don't know what it is.
You want to hope that if that's what the users chose, depending on UI, UX, other things going on, that they chose it because they wanted it, and so now at least you gave your customers something that they wanted. I mean, enough to choose that over whatever other options were in the checkout. So it does give a slight amount of validation to, even if it didn't necessarily add to your revenue or profit, that, well, at least you're providing a user experience that people are choosing to push forward with. And sometimes, in today's evolving ecosystem, sometimes that's all that you can ask for, is that you're keeping up with the times and you're delivering the experiences that shoppers appreciate.
Yeah. And other times you can't even tell if there's an improvement made. When I think about discount codes, I think this is actually one of the hardest things to understand. Should I give them a 15% off or a 10% off discount code? Okay. So let's say you A/B test this and the 15% one converts more. Is that better for your business or worse? Like, you know what I mean? Like you actually have to calculate what your profit margin was on the two of them and compare that. And then you have to decide whether you want more customers or more profit. So there's no answer that A/B testing tool could tell you on this. Like you actually have to start from like a complete business decision.
Yeah, and it's been a while, but I knew at least one platform that would run those metrics for you, that would keep testing to figure out where the highest conversion rates are versus margins and other things for different coupons and discounts. It was a pretty cool system. But again, I think you've got to be at a pretty good size to be able to afford to invest in the time and capital into using a system like that. That's not for your startup.
Yeah.
And so, it does get very interesting that, the things that we're judging on, this is complex stuff. And
nothing's in a shell anymore. They're all interdependent on each other.
Yeah. And so taking it back to maybe a point of more simplicity, we've now headed into 2020 and, we've been talking about a lot of the metrics for making choices. If you were to prognosticate a little bit, what would some of the app categories be that you think in 2020 merchants should really be considering, either looking if what they have is what they really should have, or just if they should be using something from that category altogether if they were looking at one of these app stores or marketplaces?
Yeah, definitely the first one that I'm really bullish on is live chat. We've seen adaptation of live chat increase. Well, we've seen chat tools, usage of chat tools on websites increase, but the actual live chat where you're doing real-time communication, which means under 90-second response times to customers who are actively browsing your website and interested in purchasing. I call this sales, right? Because it's actually not customer service anymore. You're a shopper assistant in a store.
Yeah, well, if this was a brick and mortar store and you had people walking the aisles looking at expensive items, starting to put a couple of things in their cart and then meander as if maybe they're going to leave the store. if one of your sales clerks, if one of your employees isn't going up to them and trying to help them see if they have questions, take care of them, then
you're fire that person eventually.
That's terrible.
Employ them because it's not brick and mortar. But so having that conversation, I think, is really important. Via the website, and I'm actually currently looking into a tool called Scout, which helps you call the customer if they put something in their cart and don't convert. You can call them to ask them what they, what might be the problem, how interested are they, et cetera, and convert with essentially an outbound sales call. They opted in to receive the call, but you're calling them as opposed to waiting for them to contact you.
Proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, and I think that things like that could be, game changers over the next.
There's a lot of remarketing that's going on these days, and that's more passive. Hey, you came to the site, so we're going to show you banners or other maybe abandoned browse emails that some of the platforms can support. Sometimes it just depends on how much data you've got. If you have an email address, if you have certain things already, that's why remarketing usually works, because if they're not blocking the ads, and in essence, you've got a pretty good shot at being able to serve them up banners and remind them to come back and complete the checkout. I do think that the chat's real great. I know, one of the things that I would run into in previous years. So there are these different platforms, even for more traditional live chat, where maybe you can use video and have more of that one-on-one. You're paying somebody to sit in front of a keyboard.
Beauty consultations, I think, will be huge for that. So the beauty is live beauty consultation with a beauty expert.
There are others where, instead of just having a chat window, the chat operator can really take over the checkout. In essence, help to add items to the cart that they think that the user might be interested in or want to see, drive the user to other pages more easily. And so have more of that consultative impact. It's like you've got a personal shopper with you. One that I thought was really cool, there's one called Pronto, Pronto, if I remember correctly. I remember recommending those folks from time to time. And what was cool about it was that they had a network of chat operators, because one of the things that I would frequently run into with merchants is that they'd say, we don't have anybody to man the battle stations, and live chat's only as good as the people you put in front of it to be able to act as your customer service or sales representatives. And so you would actually be able to choose people from their network, train them, get them on board as members of your team remotely, and you could get folks in the States, North America, or around the globe. And I thought that was a really cool idea of being able to have that supplemental workforce and treat it like the business that you want it to be. So maybe your staff is there more Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but there's a lot of sales opportunity in the evening hours. Well, you can supplement your workforce. So lots of good tech out there that, above and beyond just the passive, having something at the bottom of the screen that offers, if they want a live chat, being able to proactively reach out based upon what they're doing on the site and really help them out just like you would in a store.
I think it's kind of about unautomating. I think we maybe business and marketing went too far into automation from about 2000 to about 2020.
Yeah.
And and of course, as the internet grew, we lost the human connection. And so the brands that are making the human connection are going to succeed the best. And sometimes it's just simple things. And certainly you can scale a customer service team. You can scale a sales team. You could, it's not unscalable. It's just not, quote, automated. It's not just the machine. There's people involved.
Yeah. And, I like chatbots for certain things. If I want to check an order status or something, that might do the job just fine. If I have real questions, I can't stand them. Obviously they're getting better over time. It's a tech process, but I still prefer the human element. And I think that that's where companies win when compared with the Walmarts and Amazons of the world. It's by offering above par customer experiences.
Yeah. Here's a mind blower for the future. Because like you said, AI is not quite there yet, but it will be. Soon we'll all have AI in our hand, and it'll be our own life personal shopper. And that AI will reach out to your website it'll go into the live chat and start asking questions. And your AI on the other end will answer its questions. So two AI chatbots will talk to each other and interface. And then your personally owned AI will tell back to you the information you wanted to hear.
And then Skynet takes over.
Yes,
And and we all wind up in the Matrix. Yeah, it's.
I'm not kidding. That's about 10 years out.
I can see it now. I've already seen some of the AI talking to other. It gets pretty interesting pretty fast. But.
Yeah, for sure. Other tools or categories, let's say. So live chat is kind of maybe an emerging channel, and other ones that people are probably also familiar with. SMS, I would say, is mandatory now. So if no one's, if you don't have an SMS tool, you need to be SMS messaging. Abandoned carts for SMS.
Yeah, I mean, people read their texts. That's all it really comes down to. We knew that a few years ago that people were much more likely to open a text and act on it.
Still not doing it. Because there's some cost to it. So if you have extremely thin margin business, it might not work. But at the end of the day, increase your margins so that it works. Like, figure it out, because it's absolutely worth it. It works in nearly 100% of cases. Messenger marketing is another channel similar, or WhatsApp we could also include in there, but not as mandatory. If it depends on, if you're a very social brand, I would say it's more likely to come into play. WhatsApp is very common internationally, as compared to in the US, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't work in the US either. They've recently opened up their API, so a lot of cool things are happening with how businesses can interact through WhatsApp. So it's kind of an underutilized channel. Messenger's been there for a while, but they're actually constricting their API and the value of the tool and making it more of a pay-to-play model, similar to how they Facebook did the shrink on your business page reach about 5 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the same thing's kind of happening in Messenger now, which makes me a little less bullish on there, but it's still profitable, so you should do it.
And that's all it comes back to, right back to value, that, just because I don't use WhatsApp heavily doesn't mean that using some of these tools and, taking advantage of some of these opportunities as a business owner can't bring on another profitable channel for you or campaign or tools. So
you don't need everybody to use it for it to be a win for you. It does add a layer of complexity and a little bit of cost. So you have to figure out, the balance of all of those things. But, if you get 10% of your customers to use it and it increases their conversion rate by 15%, that's still a big, that's a boost to business. 15% of 10% is 1.5% revenue or whatever. I don't know if I did the math right, but I would take that. Yeah, 1.5% revenue boost. And it's so as long as you can figure out the level of complexity, and then just don't underestimate how many channels people want to communicate to you on, because at the end of the day, there's actually ancillary value in that. You need to be on everybody's preferred channel so that they're happy with you, and then from that they'll refer other people, and you will grow this true feeling of brand. You'll just be in their minds a lot more. There'll be less negative comments, feedback, less customer service inquiries, and because you're where they need to be. They're not trying to go to the website, find the support at email address, and sending that message, which frustrates them. They're just texting, essentially like they're texting their friend, and getting a response from a qualified rep. So those are the things. Push notifications was the other one, but push is tricky because it's anonymous users. But we're seeing conversion rates, so it's still worth it.
Interesting, yeah. So what is interesting is that so much of your list, it comes down to communication.
That's my personal communication, loyalty, and which is kind of another big one. We need to have loyalty and retention tools and programs, and then payment solutions that are breaking the price down into different steps. And I'm naturally a marketing centric person, so I'm thinking more about the marketing side of the tool stack. But of course, we can go into the operations side. Just talking about how like a company like ShipBob is offering 2-day shipping for their 3PL network. So it's okay, if Amazon's not the only one offering it now, I can offer it, and Amazon is the standard basically. I basically have to offer 2-day shipping nowadays. So there's certain changes to the operational stack that are going to have to be made for companies too. But like, if you don't have this customer journey down, as well as possible, you're not converting and retaining customers, then I don't even care what the rest of the stuff is.
So, really interesting. It's been a pleasure having you on today. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, if you want to learn more about me or e-commerce tech, you want a free tech stack consultation, reach out to me, Derric at eCommerceTech.io, and I'm sure we'll share that with people. It's DERRIC at eCommerceTech.io. Happy to chat with anybody about all sorts of tech tool decisions, problems. We can run the gamut. It's just business strategy in general. I love chatting about it.
Awesome. And if anybody's looking to get in contact with you, they can ask me. I'll make sure to give all your personal info. They can spam you as much as they.
I'll be on 20 list by tomorrow.
To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Jet Rails podcast. Going back to our earlier comments about leaving reviews, which I know we don't really want you to feel plagued with, right? But no, go leave us some reviews, Apple Podcasts and wherever you're listening today. Feel free to subscribe and check us out. And we always love hearing from you, whether it's through LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter at JetRails, or directly through the jetrails.com site. Always love hearing from listeners. We'll have some additional great content coming for you soon. And we're doing some upgrades on our podcasting tech stack. So looking forward to a really awesome 2020 with you. Happy selling.